For the final project, I decided to create the unit plan using and incorporating technology into a content area plan. This unit plan is for 6th grade students. I created it thinking about the class that I had previously before I stopped teaching to come back to school. So it incorporates 3 lessons. The first one is an introduction to ancient Egypt. The next one is about the pyramids, and then the final one is about the Nile River, and then there is a culminating project at the end. For this first lesson plan, students will have an introduction to ancient Egypt. By the end of the lesson, they will be able to identify the characteristics of a civilization like religion, social class, government, writing, agriculture, technology, and architecture. To start off, students will play 4 corners. So if you're unfamiliar with that, you have 4 corners in the classroom, and one corner represents like strongly agree, another corner is somewhat agree, a third corner would be somewhat disagree, and then the final corner would be strongly disagree. And the students will go to their corners according to the following statements. I know a lot about ancient Egypt. Mummies are cool. I want to go in a pyramid. And I could have lived in ancient Egyptian times. Students will then watch a video about what life was like in ancient Egypt, and it covers the different characteristics of a civilization, as previously mentioned. This would be in the substitution section of the SAMR model. And students will use a note catcher to write notes while they're watching the video, and students will have already learned about some of the ancient civilizations like ancient Rome, and they will have already used a note catcher before and will have already had a lesson on effective note-taking. Students will have timelines passed out. I have them linked at the bottom of this slideshow. I know that they're really small, but so those would be printed out and have students would have one. And then they're going to review the timelines on their own and kind of figure out like any patterns they're noticing, when each phase of Egyptian history occurred, and like the time in between big changes. And then they would write down the questions that they have. And then students would participate in the Think, Pair, Share. So they would have just done their own thinking, and they'll be partnered up and share their findings about the timelines, the patterns that they noticed, and then ask their questions to each other. And then as a whole group will share the conversations they had, and then ask any lingering questions that they might still have that we can discuss as a whole group. Then students will participate in a reading activity. They will be able to choose if they want to work with a partner or individually, and they're going to highlight the key text features and main ideas of each section. Students will have already done this kind of activity before, so it'll be just practicing those skills in another subject area. This will be turned in after the lesson, and students will then use their computers to research the following. To learn about the ancient Egyptian writing system, famous rivers in Egypt, ancient Egyptian paper, the Rosetta Stone, mummification, and then geography of ancient Egypt. And at the very end, students will play Kahoot, and this would be the augmentation in the SAMR model. Sorry, at the end of the other video, I started sharing the next the second lesson. So the second lesson is about the pyramids of Giza and ancient Egypt. These so students will do a recap of just like what they learned in the previous lesson about ancient Egypt, and they'll pull out their note catchers. And students will then watch a video that also includes a PowerPoint presentation about the pyramids, and it discusses like mummification, and talks about tombs and afterlife and pyramids today. Students will do a Alba partner share so during the video and PowerPoint presentation, students will use their note catchers to take more notes about ancient Egypt, and then they'll use that information to share with a partner and ask any lingering questions. And as a whole group, once again, we'll recall what we talked about as small groups, and then ask questions as a whole group if they could figure out the answers together. Students will then sit with either the same partner or a different partner, or they can read individually. And there'll be one, it's just a short passage on the pyramids and how the pyramids played a role and impact in ancient Egyptian lifestyle. And then students will have an opportunity to go on a virtual field trip and use AR. So the class will be split in half, and one group will do one thing, and then the other group will do the other, and then we'll flip-flop. So the group that'll be doing the virtual field trip will watch a video, or will watch a virtual field trip about the pyramids of Giza and and how they were built. And then the other group will use AR to build a pyramid virtually. So then once they have done both activities, they're going to transcribe any lingering questions, and they're going to write down in a Google Doc what they learned. And so they're going to start creating an e-portfolio about ancient Egypt. So they're going to use this Google Doc to talk about the characteristics of a civilization and what characteristics of the ancient Egyptian civilization they've learned, and then how the pyramids are built and their experience as a builder of a pyramid in the AR. And then students will choose one of their lingering questions and do research and document this, and then put that information in their e-portfolio. And then to finish the lesson, students are going in their e-portfolio, students will write down what achievements pyramids were for the ancient Egyptians, and then key features of how they were built. In this lesson, students will learn about the Nile River. So students will do a quick recap on what they've learned about the pyramids, about ancient Egyptian life, and then they will watch a video about the importance of the Nile River and how it impacts, how it impacted civilization and life for the ancient Egyptians. Students will then work on a hands-on project. So what they're going to use is recycled materials to create a replica of the Nile River civilization. And I'll have some examples to show them, and they'll need to include the following in their project: food sources, water, the Nile River Delta, housing, animals, countries that the Nile River touches, tributaries, plant life, the pyramids, and transportation using the river. In the second part of this lesson, students will compare and contrast the civilizations of ancient Egypt and then Rome, and I'll have a compare and contrast sheet that they use, and they will do research to find their answers if they have questions that arise. And then finally, students will add all of this information to the that they learned in this lesson in their portfolio. This lesson might be a multi-lesson unit. This lesson might end up being a multi-day lesson according to time. So then as they finish out this unit, students will create a podcast, an Ancient Egypt podcast, using Soundtrap for Education. So students will, they'll have a research sheet about ancient Egypt to answer questions and to determine what they want to include in their podcast. And some of the things that they will include that will be required are information about the Nile River and its impact on civilization. What is a civilization? Inventions of the ancient Egyptians, and then incorporating into that what inventions do we still use or that have been expanded on. Transportation, housing, pyramids, religion, pharaohs, and mummification. Students will then use a podcast sheet to plan out exactly what questions they want to ask, because in their podcast they'll be paired up and one student will be asking the questions and the other student will be answering for one podcast, and then they'll flip-flop. And so they'll use this information, and then for the culminating project they'll turn in their e-portfolio and their podcast link.